You're listening to the Messengers of Hope Mission podcast with your host, Bob Gardner.
In the last episode of the podcast, I shared about the banana story. That's what I've lovingly come to call it after sharing it for many, many years. I wanted to give a final account of it so that people could hear it at any point in time. Well, this is the continuation of the banana story. So in the last episode, I shared up till about Thanksgiving where we gave out food to, I believe it was 25 or 26 families, and that included the turkey and everything. And we didn't stop there. We kept going, and I think that was also the first year that we got some gifts for Christmas, although it might have been a little bit on the smaller side. You know, I think we gave them to the kids the first year, but I can't remember for sure. I'll have to check that out in our notes and see if I can find that and tell you about that in the future. So it was interesting as we went along with really turning into a mobile food pantry were a few things. One, we were a mobile food pantry with no mobility. We relied on volunteers to use their vehicles to bring the food out because Messengers of Hope did not have a vehicle at this point. It wasn't for another couple of years before we would actually get a vehicle. And I always think it's funny because we were a mobile ministry and we had no mobility to speak of. It was during this time that we were bringing food out to this community, setting up at a parking lot right outside of the community, that we went from being a ministry that worked out of our garage and out of our kitchen to actually being able to get a building. We had to rent it, and we still rent that same building. And we got that, and it was a huge, huge boost for us because now we could actually collect things beyond what we could keep in our garage. We had a lot more room to store things, and we did. We really started pushing to get more food. We started getting freezers, we started getting shelves, we started doing everything we could to start bringing food out, and that's where we really started to grow. Now, we kept going to this community. We started doing a couple other places as well, smaller places, but this community is really where we got started and where we got our feet wet in the mobile food pantry business as much as a nonprofit is a business. And we went to this place and we'd bring the food out. And as we'd bring the food out, we noticed every week, or at least I noticed every week when we'd pull up in these vehicles, people would be standing in kind of clumps. You know, there'd be like 3 or 4 people in one circle. There'd be like 5 or 6 in another circle, maybe an individual or a pair standing off on their own. And this went on for week in and week out. And as we started going and becoming a regular fixture there, that the people knew that we're coming, you know, they would stand in maybe a little bit larger group. You know, some of the smaller groups would start talking with the groups next to them. And then one week we pulled up and there was like a line already formed where we would set up. And, you know, there were still some small pockets of groups going on, but the line had started to form. And this went on for a few months until I started noticing that there was less and less pockets of people and a longer and longer line. It was about the same amount of people, it's just they were in line now. So this went on for quite some time, and you know, it didn't really register, it's just something I took note of. And this went on for quite a while. And then in 2017, I believe it was, we'd been going to this place now for about 2 years roughly. That's when Hurricane Irma hit. And I'm sure you remember that. That was really kind of devastating for our area. Probably the worst storm that we had in a while, at least the worst one that I can remember. And no, I am not a native Floridian, and I've only been in Tampa Bay now since about 2007. So if there was a worse storm than that, I'm not saying that Irma was the worst. I'm just saying it's the worst I can remember for this area. Anyway, that weekend we didn't go out because obviously the storm was there. But we did go out the next weekend, and it was very different. There were a lot of people there, and a lot of people did not have power back yet. They were still kind of struggling, and I had no idea what was going on, but people had some kind of camaraderie on the line. People were actually talking and being friendly with one another, and boy, I really took notice of that, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. You know, whatever it is they've been through, you know, it's kind of cemented them. Well, this went on for several weeks before I finally got an answer. If you remember last week's episode, the little girl that was so excited to get the bag lunch, she was the one that really inspired the whole banana story in the first place. Something I think I forgot to say in the story was when we pulled up, I noticed that she was licking a banana peel, and that's what really got my attention that week. So the little girl that was licking the banana peel, her grandmother came up in line every week. And this particular week, we were setting up, and I had the tables all set up. We're setting up food over the tables, and the volunteers will stand on one side, and the people will go through on the other side and kind of shop what they want. As we're setting up, this grandmother comes up to me, and I'm not going to say her name, but she comes up to me and says, "Bob, can I speak to you for a moment?" And I said, "Give me a few minutes. I'm setting up, and I'll give you my full attention." Now you have to picture this lady. She is about 4 foot tall, slight exaggeration, and about 4 foot wide, very slight exaggeration. She just the typical Norman Rockwell type grandmother, and she was just wanting to talk to me that day. She reaches across the table and grabs my arm, and we're kind of in the middle of about 5 tables, and she starts pulling me. This little short lady is pulling me all the way down to the end, away from people, to talk to me. Of course, I was brought up to respect your elders, so I was, "Yes, ma'am, what can I do for you?" And she started to tell me what was going on in their neighborhood and really what was going on in line. So you remember I was just saying how when we first got there was like pockets of people, and people were kind of really trying to avoid one another by staying in small groups. Well, she explained that to me. She said that before Messengers of Hope came there and started giving out food, they were 100% sure that their neighbors were the kind of people that if they left home, they would break in and steal from them. They had to make sure that things were locked up, that things were hidden, and they didn't trust their neighbors, and they looked at their neighbors suspiciously. And of course, they didn't know it, but their neighbors looked at them suspiciously as well. Everyone kind of thought that their neighbors were the type of people that would cause trouble for them and steal from them. But after they started getting to know one another, they started coming up every week, and they were kind of forced in a position where they had to stand online. And when you're standing online, you talk to the people next to you, or maybe you overhear a conversation and you think, well, that person's not so much different than me after all. As this grandmother was telling me this, she said, "I knew for sure that my neighbors would break into my house and steal from me. But I got to know them here online, and I realized that they were pretty nice people. So now, when I see my neighbors outside, I wave to them and I talk to them. And when I know that they can't make it to the food line and I have extra, I share with them. And you know what? They do it for me too." She said that she had lived in this community for a number of years, and since Messenger of Hope started coming, it was the first time that any of her neighbors invited her over for coffee. And she was just floored by that. And she said, they're really nice people. And she got to know them. And she started making friends with people in the neighborhood as they were standing on line on a Sunday afternoon. But it gets better than that, because I brought up a hurricane. Can't just leave that hanging there. I've got to explain why I brought up a hurricane in the first place. You see, Hurricane Irma came through and really devastated that neighborhood. A lot of things were damaged. And that neighborhood pulled together. They actually went and made sure that their neighbors had food and they had water, and they walked around, and if they saw a neighbor cleaning up their yard, they'd go over and help, and neighbors would come over and help them. And the whole neighborhood worked together to get that place cleaned up. Now, when I first went into that neighborhood, it was run down and there was trash and broken glass all over the place. You didn't see it then. I walked through the neighborhood that day and it was clean. It looked nice. It was still a low-income neighborhood, but boy, was it clean, because the people took pride in their neighborhood because they weren't afraid of their neighbors anymore. Now their neighbors are friends. Now their neighbors are family, and they treated it like that, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. This little 4-foot nothing of a woman is pointing in my face saying, "Bob, I want to thank you." And I said, "You don't have to thank me. It's not about me. This is about what God does." And, I have not shared too much about that in this podcast. I'm not going to talk about God a lot in this podcast, but that is what I give the thanks to, is God. God is the one who motivates me to do this stuff. God is the one who gave me the vision to do this. Brenda and I both to do this type of ministry. and we don't preach at anybody. We don't make anybody listen to a message. We don't make any person kind of convert or anything like that. The most we do is we pray at the beginning of the line, and then we let people come through and get the food that they want. And they don't have to pray with us. We just pray over the line. Make no mistakes, we do this because we love God, and God wants us to love other people. And boy, we do our best to try to love other people. And that neighborhood just showed us what loving other people really looked like. The people that you fear, the people that you're sure are going to hurt you, are the ones that you need to love the most. And boy, it really paid off in that neighborhood. We stayed there, that same parking lot, for another few years before we were finally kicked out because the owner of the buildings in that parking lot, a new guy, had bought the place, and he claimed that people were leaving trash there, which I know isn't true because we policed that parking lot every week before we left. But thankfully, we had someone else not even a mile away, maybe a little bit more than a mile, maybe a mile and a third away, had a bigger parking lot that we could set up in, and we moved to that bigger parking lot the very next week, and we haven't looked back. That parking lot is where we are now, just about, every month. We're there the first and third Sunday of every month, and we get hundreds of people through, and people are welcome to come there. And you know what? People get to know each other there as well. We've seen a lot of friendships be created. We've seen a lot of family bonds. We've seen, people that we get to know on a weekly basis. Sometimes we see people that come and then we won't see them for months, and then they'll come back and explain, hey, things are going really well right now. And in next week's episode, I'm going to share another story I hope that you guys will really enjoy, because this is another success story of someone that comes to that pantry or used to come to that pantry, and I'll share that next week. Thanks for listening, guys. In this week's news for Messengers of Hope Mission, we'll be holding a Thanksgiving food drive November 12th. That's a Sunday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. in Odessa at the Phi Delta Kappa Fraternity Banquet Hall. That's right off of State Route 54 next to Vallarta's Mexican restaurant. The great thing about the November food drive is if you donate a turkey or a ham or a $15 grocery store gift card, we'll give you a Messengers of Hope t-shirt for free. The food drive again will be November 12th from 11 to 2 p.m. Also, we have started our annual toy and gift drive for the holidays. We need new unwrapped gifts for children between the age of 0 and 17 years old. Please consider giving some gifts to Messenger Hope Mission for children whose families struggle even more at this time of the year. We'll also take used, good working, good condition, clean video game systems and video games to give out. Okay, everyone, this is the point of the podcast where I get to make an appeal to you, the listener. Messengers of Hope is in need of volunteers to come help work at our warehouse. We have jobs as easy as sorting food and toiletries, items like light cleaning, all the way up to lifting and stacking of boxes. If you live in the greater Tampa Bay area and want to serve with Messengers of Hope, reach out today. Go to our Facebook page and message us directly. If you're not local or do not have the ability to volunteer at Messengers of Hope Warehouse, you can still make an impact. Messengers of Hope is in need of financial gifts. Donations are tax deductible as Messengers of Hope is a registered 501c3 nonprofit. You can go to our Facebook page and find an online donation portal or get the address and mail us a check. Any amount helps more than you may think. That's going to do it for this week's Messengers of Hope Mission podcast. In the words of Mother Teresa, if you can't feed 100 people, feed just one. This is Bob Gardner reminding you to make a difference in our world today. See you next time right here on the Messengers of Hope Mission podcast.